Good morning, students. We have finished our syllabus, and from today onwards, we are going to start with our revision classes. And today, I'll be taking the first topic of Unit 1, that is Problems of Indian Society during the 19th century. And today, we are going to discuss the political problems that arose in the country during the 19th century. Now, students, we cannot directly jump into 19th century because 19th century cannot be taught in isolation. So we will be discussing a lot of ideologies and ideas of the 18th century, the problems, political problems that existed in 18th century and how it then culminated into the 19th century. It took further into the 19th century. So first and foremost, what was the political scenario of the country during the 19th, 18th, 19th century? Political scenario that existed during that time period was that there was decline of Mughal Empire. So the humongous edifice of the Mughal empires had started crumbling down. 1707 is when Aurangzeb died, and right after death of Aurangzeb, we find that the entire Mughal system started showing ideas of decline. During Aurangzeb's time period, also we find that there was certain nascent beginning of chaotic condition within the Mughal Empire, but as soon as he died, we find that the entire system of Mughal administration started showing decline. There was no centralized political control that was the main idea of the Mughal Empire, and thus the entire Mughal Empire started showing ideas of decline. Next, we have the coming of the English East India Company. Now, English East India Company came to India during the 17th century, early half of the 17th century. 1615 is when they established their factory at Surat. However, from 17th century till 18th century, we find that within 100 years, English East India Company has started emerging as a big political power in the subcontinent. And we soon realized that after Battle of Plassey and Buxar, we realized that English East India Company is not just here to trade. They're here to politically control the subcontinent. Yes, trade remained their main idea, but that idea has now taken a secondary step, and now politically controlling the subcontinent for trading better is what English East India Company has in its idea. Then we have rise of the regional kingdoms. So we have rise of Nawabs of Bengal, Nawabs of Awadh, Nizams of Hyderabad, Marathas, Sikhs, and Mysore. And these regional kingdoms then show that the Mughal system is crumbling, but regional states are showing a sign of efflorescence, showing signs of great economic growth, political growth. However, they were not able to create a situation where they could ward off or fight any foreign powers coming into India. And thus we see that soon English East India Company is then going to challenge all these regional powers and try, and through manipulation, through military might, they are going to capture all these places, and soon they're going to become master of the entire subcontinent. So let's begin with what was the political position or political problems that existed in the 18th and the 19th century. So first and foremost is fall of the Mughal Empire. As I have discussed earlier, 1707 is when we find that Aurangzeb had died, and soon after we find that the entire Mughal system started crumbling. Now, one of the reasons that has been given by historians, what led to the crisis of Mughal Empire was that there was crisis in Jagirdari system. Now, entire Mughal system was based on two pillars, that is Mansabdari system and Jagirdari system. Both Mansabdari and Jagirdari system are closely interlinked, and thus if crisis happened in one system, it resulted in crisis in another system. And since they were the pillar, or they were the foundation of entire Mughal system, as soon as the foundation started shaking, the entire building of Mughal Empire came crumbling down. Now, according to Jagirdari crisis in Jagirdari system, Satish Chandra and J.F. Richards have given two different ideology in terms of what they considered as crisis in Jagirdari system. Satish Chandra has called it as a Jagirdari crisis, that is, there were no good Jagirs. So, according to Satish Chandra, the whole idea of Mughal Empire was getting more Jagirs with time. With promotion, you're getting more Jagirs. Now, this idea of promotion after every frequent time led to a lot of nobles by the end of 18th century not being able to get enough Jagirs because there are no Jagirs. Jagirs are limited. Now nobles are more in number. Now nobles, if you started as a humble noble of 100 Zat rank, 100 Sawar rank, and in 1707 you are 5,000/5,000, you need to get a Jagir which is equivalent to that. And thus there were no Jagirs to give to nobles, and as soon as Jagirs were not being there, there were Jagirdari crisis, Jagirs were not there. These Jagirdars, who were also the Mansabdars, stopped getting army for the Mughal ruler, and thus the army exponential value of the army also decreased. Now, this is what Satish Chandra is giving. J. Richards, on the other hand, is saying that there is no crisis of Jagir. There is no problem of Jagir. What had happened is that most of the land that was captured by Aurangzeb during Aurangzeb's time period, that is in the Deccan, went to the king's share. That is called Khalisa land. That is, revenue from that directly goes to the king. And since there were more nobles that were coming up, because the entire region of Deccan was now part of Mughal system, there were exponential rise in the nobility. Thus, we find that there were there were less number of Jagirs to give to the nobles. It wasn't as if Jagirs were less in number. Jagirs were there, but how a king has taken, especially Aurangzeb, had kept all those Jagir for himself, and that was one of the reasons why nobles were getting a little disgruntled because they were not being able to get Jagirs. Now, this is one of the ideology that there was a crisis in the Jagirdari system. However, another set of historians have argued that there was factionalism within Mughal nobility. That Mughal nobility was divided on the basis of race. So we had four types of nobility, division of nobility under the Mughals. First were Iranians, then they were Turanians, the Turks, the Iranians, the Turks. Then we had Rajputs, and the last one was Indian Muslims. That is, Muslims who were Indian in descent, that they got converted to Islam. Now, all these four groups were trying to get more power. Now, initially we had people like Akbar, people like Jahangir, people like Shah Jahan, people like Aurangzeb, managing all these factions very good because they were strong rulers. However, after decline after death of Aurangzeb, we find that we have string of weak successors, and those weak successors were not being able to manage these factionalism. So these factions became stronger than the Mughal ruler. Now they were trying to place whoever would give them more benefit on the throne. So thus the Mughal ruler became a puppet of all these factions. These factions were fighting amongst themselves. So thus that also led to the decline of Mughal Empire. Now, weak successor, as we have discussed, after 1707, we have strings of weak successors who had come to power. These successors, the successors of the Mughal Empire, some of them lasted 84 days. They were and they were killed by their own nobles. So you can understand that their position was not very strong. They were such weak rulers, and if you have a weak ruler, then obviously the entire system is going to go into a chaos, and thus we find that Mughal Empire started crumbling right after death of Aurangzeb because there were no able rulers. Now there was corruption within Mughal administrative system. In this, there is a concept called Ijara Dari system. Now what would happen is, suppose I am a Mughal noble and I am being given land of, say, Ayodhya as Jagir, and I am a Faujdar in Bengal. Now it is very difficult for me to travel every now and then to Ayodhya, collect revenue, and maintain my army. So what do? I farm out my Jagir to somebody else, to another person. Now this person could be anybody. He's just saying that, okay, I will give you your share of rent, of revenue, and whatever extra that I collect, it would be mine. Now this ijara dar, which is known as in the system of farming out of revenue, is called ijara dari. Now these ijara dars, what do? Is that they extract more from the peasants, and thus we find that peasants was somebody who were getting very hard pressed. More revenue was being taken away from them, more revenue more than they can give, and thus we find that entire system was undergoing corruption. Further, we find that there were a lot of internal politics happening because of factionalism, because of personal interest of people being over and above the entire interest of the empire. This was one of the reasons that Mughal Empire became completely destroyed, because we find that nobles became more powerful than rulers. Now nobles, for their own benefit, were joining hands with the factional power or with other powers, and thus the entire Mughal system started crumbling, and also the position of Mughal ruler was something that was just titular. He had no actual power. Power was in the hands of the nobles, who were utilizing it to gain maximum benefit. Now, this is fall of Mughal Empire, which led to a political crisis, political chaos. Next, we have English East India Company's political expansion. As we have studied, you must have studied in your Indian legal and constitutional history, we have factory establishment in Surat, Bombay, Madras, and Calcutta. Now, Surat, Royal Farman was given by Jahangir to Thomas Roe to establish a factory in Surat. Bombay was given to English East India Company. They bought it from the king because the king got it as a dowry when he married the Portuguese princess. Madras was bought from the ruler of Madras Pattanam, and thus became part of the English East India domain. And Calcutta, the Zamindari of Calcutta was purchased by English East India Company from Akbar II, that is grandson of Aurangzeb, and thus Calcutta, Sultanate and Govindpuri were areas where English East India Company got Zamindari rights, that is right over produce of a land, hereditary right over produce of the land. Now this is how we have the initial establishment of English East India Company. Especially in the area of Calcutta, we find that English East India Company started getting involved in the regional politics, and soon we will find that it became so important that during Battle of Plassey and Buxar, 1757 and 1764, they were able to defeat the forces of the Nawab of Bengal, and thus being able to capture, they get Diwani rights of that region. Now, Diwani rights give you a lot of privileges. That is, revenue of the entire region is now in your hand. Earlier, it was Zamindari of 3 areas. Now the entire Bengal, that consists of Bihar, that consists of Orissa, that consists of entire West Bengal and East Bengal. The entire region's Diwan, you are the Diwan. So that means you are going to be the exchequer. Money is going to come in your hand. And this led to English East India Company realizing that if they want no money to be transferred from Britain and rather money being generated within the subcontinent, this is the best deal, that you have political control over the region. And Plassey and Buxar became a foundation for then what we will see as British Empire later. Then we have rise of regional kingdoms. Now regional kingdoms became very important. When we have decline of the Mughal Empire, we have the Mughal Empire crumbling down. We have the regional areas which were earlier associated with the Mughal Empire also started taking their autonomy. They decided that if in the center the person is not being able to control, the states then get more power. So thus we have in Bengal, Nawabs of Bengal coming up. Now Nawabs of Bengal were first and foremost appointed by the Mughal rulers. But soon we find that Nawabs of Bengal, those still considered them as titular heads, the Mughal ruler as titular head, yet they completely removed themselves from Mughal center. They would not send uh, money or revenue to the center, rather they'll keep it then for themselves. They devised new revenue policy, they devised their own military system, they devised their own courtly culture, and thus we find that Nawabs of Bengal that rose were trying to break free from Mughal centers association. After this, we have Awadh. The Nawabs of Awadh also started doing the same thing. Awadh was a very economically vibrant center, and Awadh became important because we find that smaller zamindar, Awadh, the ruler of Awadh realized that they have to be militarily strong. So they started recruiting their own army. Also, they started going into direct alliances with the small zamindaris of region around Awadh. So rather than Mughals having any association with the Zamindars, it was the Nawabs who started striking personal relationships with the Zamindars of the region. The biggest one being the uh, the biggest, I would say that domain was when they were able to capture the association with the Bhumia Rajas and the Jat kingdom was something that became exponentially good for Nawabs of Awadh. Nizams of Hyderabad became exceptionally important, and we will find that Nizam Shahi that got established completely dissuaded the purpose of Mughal ruler. They completely disconnected themselves from the Mughal ruler from initial time. And thus they were able to capture their own autonomy, and they became one of the most strong contenders who were political contenders who helped English East India Company in establishing control over South India. Otherwise, it would have been extremely difficult for English East India Company because they had French colonizers on one hand, and they had Dutch colonizers also, and then they had the Mysore. Tipu Sultan was there. You have Nizam Shahi of Hyderabad. So there were a lot of contenders, and all of them were very strong. So the only good part with the English East India Company was because they were able to strike a good amount of relationship with Nizam Shahi of Hyderabad. And Nizam Shahi of Hyderabad were very rich area because of their international trade in precious and semi-precious stones, and also because Mughal rulers were still kind of busy in their North Indian domain, and they were not able to actually control South India that well. Marathas were also there. So all of them were contesting powers, and they all were very strong. So Nizam Shahi of Hyderabad also became a very important regional state, which was now not communicating with the Mughal center. Next, we have Maratha power under Peshwas. Under Peshwas Baji Rao, we find that Marathas had started becoming so strong that militarily they were far more superior than the Mughal Empire, and actually they were able to defeat the Mughal Empire and put Mughal Emperor as a under what do you call under the guardianship of the Peshwas. So Peshwas, Marathas established by Shivaji, and after Shivaji we find that Sahu, his grandson, also came to power. However, it was under the Peshwas that Marathas actually started territorially expanding as well. And we find that soon Marathas are going to capture as far as Delhi. They came till Delhi, so we find that you have all these regional powers becoming very important. Then we have Sikhs who were there in Punjab and in the region of now it is part of Pakistan. A Sikh power emerged as a agricultural rebellion against the Mughal Empire. However, soon they started developing. It was a religious movement also. Soon they started developing under Ranjit Singh as a political power, and they challenged the authority of the Mughal emperor, and they were able to completely decide their own, completely be an independent regional state. They had no association with the Mughal rule. And last but not the least, we have Mysore under Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan. Mysore being very important, a very important trade center in terms of port cities, and also they had much French connection, and thus these regional kingdoms were trying to make sure that they are not directly or indirectly also. Certain were indirectly relating to Mughal emperor, but most of them have started disassociating, and they all these places then became focal point for economic growth, for political growth, and for military growth. Now the focus was not in Delhi. The focus was on these regional kingdoms. These regional kingdoms were fighting among themselves for expanding their territory. And thus we find that English East India Company emerged as one of the contesting political power, and sooner or later we're going to see how English East India Company defeated all these regional power and emerged as the superpower in the subcontinent. And with that, we have done with the political crisis that happened in the 19th century, 18th and the 19th century, and how when we will study Revolt of 1857, these are the backgrounds that should be kept in mind when we will study Revolt of 1857. And with that, we will come to an end for today, part 1 of the lecture.